My name is Pramod Deshmane. I lead the certification division. As you said, all the certifications for all the customers and all, I have oversight and ensure that everything is done in a compliant manner and all. I live in Fairfax, Virginia, pretty close to my office. We have just moved to a bigger place now, and I can literally walk in 5 minutes. So that's great. Okay, so for today, we'll dive into compliance, the common compliance challenges, which we have seen, as Kishore said in the morning, that we have 2 decades of experience. I myself, have been doing these security audits or in the audit industry for past 12 years, have audited or assessed several hundred customers for multiple regulations and all, right? So from control case standpoint, what common challenges which we see, in compliance domain and how to tackle them. Before we get into that, we'll talk about how the compliance is defined in an organization, right? So let's start with that. If you just Google compliance, this is what shows up, Webster, right? So it's basically compliance is either a state of being in accordance with established guidelines or specification or the processes of becoming so. It's a basic definition of compliance. We can also relate from security perspective is like it is an effort to ensure that organizations are abiding by both industry regulations or government legislations. Like industry regulations, we're talking about PCI DSS and all, and by government legislations, we're talking about GDPR, for example, right? Quite often compliance is taken as a point-in-time activity where your assessor comes in, performs an annual audit and then leaves, right? That's how normally we see compliance and all, where they come, they review your environment against various standards, regulation, say that everything's good, and then they leave. But the issue is, since this is an annual activity, the issue is what happened in time gap between the assessment, what happens to your security posture, right? You see it as an annual activity, right? You start with an assessment 3 or 4 months before your certification date. Assessor comes, reviews it, and again the cycle continues. What happens between that assessments, 2 assessment? That is the worry. Often people get confused between compliance and security. They see that, okay, I have to comply against PCI DSS, Jan 31st is my date, we start somewhere in September, like 4 months back, we get done, that's done, right? Then let's worry about it during next September and all, right? So compliance demonstrates where you are with respect to the various regulation standards and all at that point of time, but the intent is also to ensure you do security right and continuous, right? Let me go to this compliance curve. How many of you can, recognize yourself to this compliance curve, right? If you see, this curve shows on the tip of the curve, you see that's when the audit gets done. But prior to that, as I said, normally these activities goes for 5 to 6 months and all. 7 months before the compliance date, this is where you land, right? Apathy, there is no concern, right? No worries and all. You're getting into 5 or 6 months before the assessment and all, that's where the worry starts. Oh, I have to get compliant, I have that audit which is coming up in 5 to 6 months. Little bit you're worried. Time goes on, you're 3 months or 4 months away from your certification or audit, that's where you get into panic mode. Now I have to ensure that I satisfy all the needs. I have to ensure because if we don't get compliant, it's a business impact, right? For some folks, they might even lose their job if they don't get audited or compliant on time, right? So you get into panic mode, you're 2 months away from your certification, and that's where the scrambling start. Do whatever to ensure that you have all the artifacts, everything is there, and somehow you reach to that tip, right? That's they call compliance safe zone for that period, for a month or 2, right? You get compliant, you get your certificate, and after that, you have a post-audit hangover, right? So, after drinks, that hangover lasts for a day or 2. This hangover goes for weeks and months, right? You don't want to hear about compliance. You don't want to hear about audit, right? Because you have so burned out that I have spent 4 months getting all the artifacts, all the evidences and all. It went back and forth. I'm tired now. I don't want to get into this, right? Let me relax. So that audit hangover goes for months, and then that's where your compliance free fall starts, because that curve has to repeat it, right? I mean, after again 6 months, you're in the same state, and you come. So this is, what we have seen in general, a state, how compliance is looked at, that you look at it as a point-in-time activity, right? It's a once-a-year audit, right? Let me worry about it when I'm near to that date. Apart from that, I just want to focus on my work and all, right? That's the common state, and we have seen because of this issue happens. I remember a funny fact, like, as I said, I'm doing this audit for last 12 years and all. So before joining Control Case, with my previous consulting firm, we used to do ISO audits, and my firm was doing ISO consulting. So there's one customer in India, they used to take our services, and we used to go on site 3 months before the ISO audit. And our job was to ensure, do whatever it takes, but get them ready so that they can face an audit, right? So you work with them, create artifacts, generate things, work with them on a daily basis, and ensure that they can face an audit. And I said, why don't you do it a year long? I said, Pramod, we have so many things. This is the last thing we want to worry about, right? We are taking your services so that you can come, give us a consulting, get us ready, and let us face that audit. Once audit is done, we'll not worry about for next 2 quarters and all, right? Things have changed, but not much, right? I mean, we still have issues and all. This next slide shows, all these breached entities or breaches and all that are very well known, right? There are a few of them very well known. Every year you have, many breaches and all. Equifax, a recent breach and all, right? You can see 143 million records got compromised, right? Yahoo, 2016, though it happened in 2013-14, it got in light in 2016, right? Anthem, 2015, again 80 million records. Home Depot, 2014, 50 million records. And JP Morgan Chase, Sony Pictures, Target. These are all good examples. Now, were they not following compliance? They were, right? Most of them, they were following either PCI DSS compliance or some ISO and all. It is not that they didn't have a compliance program, but the issue is how you look at the compliance, right? It goes back to that compliance curve. If you treat compliance as a point-in-time activity, you're bound to have issues and all, right? All these entities were certified, but still they had some issues and all, because of which, they got breached. And in most of the cases, these breaches and all could have been avoided, right? We'll talk more about it. We'll take Equifax as a case and all when we dive into the compliance challenges and all. But this is an example. Again, these are not the only, these are well known, but every year you have breaches and all, right? And in most cases, those entities are compliant, but they still get breached. And the reason is how you look at your compliance program, right? So again, I see compliance is a way for business to drive or to achieve their security, right? As I said, people often get confused between compliance and security, right? They're not the same, right? Compliance is a point-in-time activity, but it can help you to achieve your security requirements, right, in a better way. And the intent of compliance to ensure that your security is right and continuous, right? I'm sure most of you have gone through PCI DSS audits. Now, if you have seen certain recent changes between version 2 and version 3.2 is addition of business as usual, BAU. That is because they want to ensure organizations are not looking at these regulations as one-time activity, and security is integrated into their daily life cycle, right? It is part of all the operations and all. You treat it as it is required every single day. So, what are the high-level expectations from compliance? So when we say you have a good compliance program, we expect that compliance to ensure there is a continuous monitoring, right? There is a continuous improvement, continual improvement, right? It should result into. Then it should facilitate periodic reviews. A good compliance program should facilitate periodic reviews. Then it should also help or results into standardized implementations, right? Where you have certain baselines and all, and then you ensure everything is standardized. That is what compliance program should drive. Then obviously the expectation is that leadership is on board, right? Your C-level folks or your middle management and all, they're pretty much part of the compliance program. That is the expectation. And obviously the management dashboard. your compliance program should lead where it gives you the high level, like C-level folks or board of directors and all, it gives a good management dashboard where you stand, right? These folks are not, interested to hear what technical vulnerabilities you have and all. They want to know what is your security posture, where you stand and all, right? We'll talk a bit more about it when we dive into another challenge and all. So these are the high-level expectation of a compliance program. If you have a good compliance program, these are bound to be met. There are many, but these are definitely important one. Now let's talk about challenge areas, right? As I said in the beginning, we have been doing audit for 2 decades, right? And we have assessed several hundred customers, right, for multiple regulations and all. Based on our understanding, these are the common areas, not the only, but these are the key common areas where we have seen compliance fails, or these are the challenges. So first challenging area is scoping. We'll deep dive into each area, but to go with, scoping is an important activity, right? Any audit or assessment engagement you start, it always starts with scoping, right? Unless you know what is your scope, it won't go further. Third parties and vendor, it is very common to use third parties, vendors, service providers nowadays, right? For many things are outsourced. You take support services for many things. So third parties and vendor, that's one area where we have seen, we have compliance challenges. Multiple audits. It is not new that organizations are going through multiple audits, be it PCI DSS, ISO, GDPR, SOC, and all, right? So that is one area, again, we have seen challenges. Maintaining business as usual, right? That is one, to ensure it's a continuous compliance. Maintaining security controls. When you get into audit, you do implement them, everything is done and all, but you maintain them on a continuous basis. So that's where we have seen challenges. There are some technical challenges and all where you do want to do something, but there are some technical limitations. We'll dive into that. And then there is management buy-in, which is most important, right? If there is no management buy-in, all these other points and all of no use. So let's dive into scoping. Now, as I said, scoping is the key and the first activity, for any audit, any assessment which you do. And what we have seen, if we are saying we are spending a 5 to 6 months timeline with an organization for audit, initial month or 2 are spent in scoping only, which is not ideal in general, right? And the reason why, because it starts with why we are talking about this environment has to be in scope, why we are bringing these systems and all, right? It goes back and forth between the client and an auditor or an assessor, right? The reason is there are no clear data flows documented, which explains, in many cases, I'm saying data flows are not documented in detail, which shows like how the sensitive data, be it card data for PCI, be it ePHI, PHI for your HIPAA and HITRUST, right? Or any PII information for GDPR, how that information is stored, processed, transmitted. Unless you have that documented, it is not going to give a good visibility to your assessor and confirm the scope. So in a combination, also the data sources, which all system, where in the larger infrastructure where you have number of business processes and all, right? It is difficult to identify the data sources where that cardholder data, PII or PHI information is stored and all, right? So that's always, and that is how it takes a month or 2 just to freeze the scoping. What we have seen, the organizations, we have documented good data flows and are using some automated data discovery methods, right? There are many solutions out there which can discover the sensitive information. Like for example, Control Case has CDD, right, which can detect the cardholder information and also can detect the PHI or PII. If you use them, right, it helps to identify not only the known location but any unknown locations. Many times we have seen it is not that organization wants to hide the information, but accidentally, certain logs files are generating data, and those log files or in somewhere in the file system, the data is stored and all, and they are not known to the organizations, right? It is while you're in the assessment phase, you learn that what is this log file? Why it has the sensitive data like card number or any PHI, and they say, we didn't know that this logs was not supposed to store that data and all, right? So using data discovery solution will help you to identify the sources where this data is stored and all, And with that, see, again, it is all with intent, right? No standard in a black and white say that you have to use data discovery tools, right? But it is all about intent. You want to ensure your scope is properly identified, and based on that, all the assessment covers all the system platform, all those network segments and all, right? So it is very essential that you use those methods and all. It just helps, right, to identify or finalize the scope and all. Also, you can use network segmentation methods and all. PCI, as an example, does talk about, if you want to reduce your scope, ensure you use segmentation method. That does mean anything which is important, which stores the card data and all, or anything which provides security service and all, you can isolate that from your general corporate network and all. If you do that, if you ensure that there is a proper segregation, you can limit the scope to the specific environments. We have seen companies using flat network, and again, that's where the issue is. What to assess, because if you have a flat network, your corporate network and your critical network which has processes the sensitive data, if it is in a flat network, it just becomes difficult to manage that scope and get done with the assessment. So again, the key point is having detailed data flows documentation, use of automated data discovery tools, right, which will help you to basically identify the sources. And second part of the scoping, which third bullet you can see in challenges, is asset management, right? It's a key thing. You may identify the data sources, you may identify the the networks or VLANs and all, but which all asset part of that network which you have to assess. Let me go back to that one of the breach, Equifax, which I said I'll talk about it more. Equifax got breached in 2017. Now, if you see the order, in sometime in March, I think March 10 or so, one of the vulnerability got released. Apache Strut specific vulnerability information got released by the OEM. Now, that happened in March. In May, based on the information which is available on the various forums or website, in May, the malicious user or hackers exploited that vulnerability and gained access. They basically exploited a dispute web application. They gained the credentials, and they could use those credentials to access 40-odd servers, and hence they could access the backend databases, right? Now, the vulnerability information got released in March 10. The exploitation took place in mid-May. It's like more than 2 months period. What it shows? Now, again, if I take a PCI example, it says that whenever you have any critical security patch, ensure you have a program to deploy that patch in a timely manner. At least in a month, it says in black and white, right? Now, Equifax probably knew about it, but they didn't do anything. 2 reasons is they did not think that that dispute portal, which has connection to the critical environment or critical database system, should be part of the assessment and all. It was not part of their assessment asset inventory, in short, right? That is one. Secondly, they did not do anything for that because scanning was not effective. They didn't identify, they just focused on some critical assets, not the other connected system. So they didn't know that they have to fix it. In May, exploitation took place. They gained the access. Equifax didn't know for 2 months. They only got to know in July. What that shows is they didn't have good monitoring program, right? So going back to this, inventory or asset management is a key thing. Now, many organizations have challenges over there, right? Small organizations, you have 50, 100 server, it is easy to maintain it, right? You don't have major changes and all. Bigger organization, complex environment, where changes happen quite often, it's a technical challenge, how you keep up with this, right? And that's where we have seen organizations who are using, I have referred term called CMDB, which is nothing but configuration management database system, right? So you have asset management system in a simple term, which can do auto discovery and ensure all the asset, like you give them a particular segment, wheel and all, they will scan and then you'll get to know, right? So they can capture all hardware and software information for you, right? So use of or maintaining such CMDB or asset management tools will help you to ensure you know what all assets you have in the environment and all, right? And based on the versions and all, you can always, when a particular vulnerability comes out, you know that, oh, this vulnerability affects this XYZ software version. Let me take a look at my CMDB. Let me run for that query. How many web application, Apache specific version I have? How many operating system version I have for that specific vulnerability? That way, it will help you to plan your remediation, right? So it is very essential. Again, when we talk about scoping, it's a mixed approach, right? To reiterate, we're talking about documenting detailed data flow, which helps you to identify all possible systems which deal with sensitive data. Secondly, if you want to reduce scope, you can use network segmentation methods. Data discovery solution, again, will help you to identify the actual sources and all, where data is not getting stored knowingly, but unknowingly or accidentally in the form of logs and all. And then implementation of CMDB or asset management solution and all, which will help you, right? We have seen whoever are using this methods and all, it has helped them, to manage scope effectively. Otherwise, going back to my point, this scoping exercise goes for months. Moving on, next challenge, third-party vendors. As I said, it's very common for organizations to use third parties, right? Now, you may use or engage third parties who process the data, be it card data or PH data for you. Then you may have third-party vendors who provide certain managed services, security services to you, or it can as simple as the co-location or facility, hosting facilities and all. It's very common. What we have seen that it is a requirement by most of the regulations and all that your third party demonstrate compliance. If you are outsourcing a particular function or taking any services which can have a security impact on your environment, you have to ensure that they also meet certain compliance requirement. In many cases, during our audit experience, we have seen, we get done with the audit, we are done with everything. With respect to that organization, they have demonstrated everything. And then we know, oh, they have outsourced this function to a particular third party, and the third party is not demonstrating any compliance. They don't follow any compliance requirement, but we do see a direct impact to the main entity's environment, and that's where it becomes a showstopper. That we can't move ahead. As a PCI DSS has a black and white requirement where it says that you have to identify your third parties in various categories and ensure they demonstrate their PCI compliance, right? Either they demonstrate it or participate in your audit. So this becomes a big challenge, like big issue when you're audit, and this is where, if certain things are not done during the onboarding or during initial engagement, it becomes a big pain for an organization, right? I have spoken to, folks, and they said, Pramod, it's difficult, right? Our contracts are defined 2 years back, and, we are asking them that they have to either go through a PCI or XYZ compliance or participate, and they say no. Our contract doesn't say that, we cannot bear the cost and all, and it just, just gets stuck over there. And as I said, it impacts the compliance of the main entity, right? So what we are heading into is due diligence during onboarding process or initial engagement, right? So it is very essential that you establish a process, right, where third party is a vendor, the proper due diligence or risk analysis is done. Many times we have seen it's driven through a set of questionnaire. First, it starts with, you should have certain categories like A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, where based on the risk impact. So you engaging with a hosting facility versus a payment processor, both are service providers or vendors, right? They both have certain impact, but impact with facility is more from physical security perspective versus with processing, you have a risk of, losing your data if that processor or any entity which processes your data, being a third party, if they are not compliant, you are at risk of getting your data compromised. So you should identify the third parties and categorize them with risk factor, right? So that it will help you where you have to focus more, and based on their function and role, you can ask them to demonstrate certain compliance. And this has to happen during initial engagement, even before you onboard them or even before you lay a contract with them and all, right? That's a due diligence process. So you have to ensure that that is done, proper risk analysis and proper checks are done. Then on ongoing basis, as I said, it is very essential for an organization to monitor the compliance status, of the third parties, you should have a compliance monitoring program where on annual basis, you go and check, I have these 10 service providers or third party, and they do have direct or indirect impact to my compliance, right? And I have to go and check with their compliance, whether they have got done with their audits and all, where they stand and all, right? So that program should be there. And obviously, the most important area where again we have seen is roles and responsibility. Is you think that, many times people have come that, oh, AWS maintains their PCI compliance, so we should be good. But AWS doesn't cover, AWS definitely cover their infrastructure, right? Their hosting infrastructure and all, but your guest operating systems which are going to run on that hosting infrastructure are not covered under their PCI certification, right? They may provide some additional services and all, but there is a customer responsibility to ensure when you host anything on AWS, you have to also ensure certain compliance is taken care in your assessments and all. So what I'm going towards is roles and responsibilities between third parties and the main entity should be properly documented so that it doesn't become an issue when you're in assessment phase and all. So that is important factor. Moving next, multiple audits, right? Kishore talked about one audit earlier in his session and all. So we have seen, and this is not uncommon, many organizations are going with, multiple audits like PCI, SOC, ISO, as we have seen and all, right? So key challenges over there is the repetition, right? There is a good overlap between these different standards or regulation, 40, 50% depending on what regulation or standard you're talking about. So repetition is one where audit team is involved, in providing same information to multiple auditors, right? You ask password policy for PCI, we provide that. In 2 months' time, IS auditor comes, again you provide that information to them. Again, for GDPR, you provide that information, right? So it's like a good amount of repetition, financial cost, ensuring that you are involving your manpower, also engaging with multiple auditors and all. So there is a financial cost, and it also adds complexity and time. As I said, time, these audits go throughout a year and all. So what we're talking about, we have seen organizations, we have combined security assessment approach or one audit approach and all, gets benefit of it because, as I said, there is a good overlap. Like control case have few customers where we follow one audit approach, one assessment, and we have seen that it's like collect once and use multiple times, right? So that approach certainly helps an organization to save time, avoid the repetitions and all. So we highly recommend that if you are into multiple audits, you have to just ensure you align your audits or assessment same time, as long as scope is same and all, that will definitely add a value. Then second point, having one assessor, definitely it saves a lot in terms of time and explaining things to different auditors and all. And as we said, one assessment results in reduced effort and interaction with multiple standards. It just becomes easy, right? You can save significant amount of time and all. So again, this is more from organization going through multiple audits. We recommend going through a one audit approach wherever possible. It just helps. Maintaining business as usual. As I said, in the beginning I said compliance is often looked at as a point in time activity, right? PCI, I give an example, PCI with their 3.1, they made a major changes where they have talked about this BAU process for each and every requirement. You have to ensure that not only when you get assessed and all, when you demonstrate your compliance one time, you have to ensure that those controls, the maintaining those controls is done throughout a year, right? So the major challenge we have seen that this BAU is not effective is mainly the ingraining compliance as a culture, right? It's from top C-level to the operational or functional teams and all. If that culture is not there, it certainly impacts, right? You have to learn that. Many organizations we have seen that they just treat this audit or compliance as one-time activity and all, and they just move on. And that culture, unless it changes, it will not help you. Absence of compliance monitoring program, right? So, as I said, the high-level expectation from the compliance program or the key expectation from compliance program is you have to have a good monitoring program in place, which will help you to monitor your status on regular basis. So we basically, want to recommend that you should implement a continuous compliance program. You may use help from your assessors and all, right, where they can come in and review an environment, review certain requirements on certain frequency, and give you the compliance, a dashboard for those particular controls. It will just help. Performing periodic reviews and communication. So one of the main requirement is that you have to ensure the reviews for critical controls of compliance is done on a periodic basis. Now, it depends on a control, what periodicity you have to follow. Like PCI says you have to perform scans on a quarterly basis. Log should be reviewed daily basis. Penetration test should be done on annual basis. Firewall rules should be done on a semi-annual basis, right? So to ensure that you do you have a periodic reviews for effectiveness of this control as part of this continuous compliance program. And ensure that controls are remaining in place throughout a year instead of just point-in-time activity and all. Right? So, and that leads to maintaining security controls. The key challenges over here is compliance knowledge. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a question, as far as the business as usual, you see things evolving as such that there will really start to be some teeth and some penalties where folks really will be forced to and evaluated on whether they really are doing it day in and day out. Like where are we in that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if the standards or regulations have reached that level where they want to impose the fines and all, right? But as I said, it impacts your compliance cycle. If you don't follow that, you're bound to miss your certification timelines and all, which will have a business impact, right? So there's an indirect impact, but we have not seen that the standards or regulations have reached that level where they'll start imposing the fines and all.
I guess beyond the standards, for standards to reach there, technology has to reach there, right? Which is the other side of it.
Right.
If you had to be able to do something, you need a tool to actually be able to do it. And I don't necessarily think the world is there quite yet, maybe a few years away. But to your point, the business as usual, I think we're seeing regulations start putting that requirement in. I don't necessarily know if there are standardized practices and really software, tools, technology, if you call, to actually be able to monitor it accurately, prove it, and are you actually doing it? That's, it honestly, at the end of the day, it comes down to that, right? Which is, and then you go from business, and if there is technology to do it, then why quarterly? Why not weekly? And then if it's weekly, why not daily, right? And someday it's going to get there. I don't think the technology is quite there yet from what we see it, but I mean, everybody's trying to get there. I think the good start is that the regulations are starting to put the business as usual requirement to some degree, right?
Are there some implications where if you're assessed, the assessor comes in and says, okay, you've met this somewhere on PCI, and then you have a breach 2 months later, and the evaluation as well. Yeah, you were compliant when you were assessed, but 2 months later you weren't.
Yeah.
So therefore you're subject. It's in the customer's interest to be that much more frequently, and they can make the argument that, well, no, we were still compliant because we have this BAU program in place.
No, that's a good question, right? And it's a question about where does the rubber hit the road, right? Which is, are we going to reach a point where essentially someone can guarantee through protection or liability or in some mechanism that if you go through an assessment, whether it's daily, weekly, quarterly, right? Hopefully daily, then you're not going to get breached, right? That's literally the $1 million question. And I think when the technology gets there, it might be possible. I don't know whether it's a year away, I don't know, it's 5 years away, but it's coming where insurance and liability is tied very closely to chances of breach and to a breach, right? And the guarantee of not having a breach. That circle will be completed at some point. I don't know how many years away we are from it, but it can't be completed unless there's technology to do it. And I think the world is slowly progressing to trying to get there. We all are. I think everybody in this room is, and I do believe we will get there eventually and tie insurance back to the chance of a breach, to actually being able to monitor it. But to your point, I think the BAU, coming back to your original question, the BAU is starting to build that conversation right now, right? And as Pramod said, we are asking that question we actually, like, as assessors, we are at least asking the question, are you doing it? Now, we all know we have a long way to go in assessing it.
Thanks. Yeah, so going back to this, maintaining security controls, the key challenges are compliance knowledge or lack of subject matter expertise and all, lack of tools, security compliance tools and all, and, where you have security or compliance implementation which are not in your controls, like where you have outsourced it and all. So certain solutions are you ensure that you conduct regular trainings to ensure you build that subject matter expertise and all. It is very essential and important to have a dedicated security role. We have seen again that, where in organization they say, I have so many responsibilities. I don't have time to look after this compliance program because, I'm not a compliance officer. In bigger organizations, you have it, right? But in many mid-scale organizations and all, there is always an issue. So having a dedicated security role with a good background where they know what they have to do from compliance perspective and all, will always help you to drive your initiatives, right? Security requirements and all. Obviously have regular risk assessments or internal audits to review your security posture. As I said, assessor comes and reviews your environment once a year for 3-4 months, right? And then he's gone. You have to ensure for continuous compliance, to ensure the security is continuous, you have to perform certain risk assessments or internal audits and review your own security postures, right? Bring in your assessor as and when needed, right? Whenever you make any major infrastructure changes, we highly recommend to engage with your assessor, give them a visibility and let them know that this is a major change we're doing, what do you think, what we should do and all. So that when get into audit assessment mode, when you are near your certification date, you're not worrying about that change which you carried out 2 or 3 months back, how it impacts your compliance. So engage with your assessor and have a security role in your organization. It will certainly help, right? Moving next. Technical challenges. This is one sheet I'm sure everyone can relate to, right? It is very difficult, to keep up with certain things. PCI says maintain quarterly compliance scans, right? Again, for a small environments, very easy. For a large or complex environment, performing scan and maintaining compliant result is difficult. We understand that. There are a number of reasons. Then also ensuring that you update your security patches and all on regular basis, right? We have seen Equifax, that breach was because that particular Apache Strut patch was not deployed. And log management, daily log review. Again, going back to that Equifax example where breach happened in May and until July, they didn't know about it. That does mean there was an issue with their monitoring program, right? The malicious user, like that hacker, was trying to they stole so much data from their database and all, and it is difficult to digest that they didn't know about it. That does mean there's something, wrong with their monitoring program. They may have logging solution, but maybe their logging review or, log review process is not effective. So these are common challenges, right? Now, if we talk about keeping clean vulnerability scan, as I said, it is challenging and all. But at least what you can do, ensure that you perform scan in a timely manner, right? And then you have some kind of a risk ranking process where you prioritize your risks. A scan may show 1,000 vulnerabilities. No standard expects you to remediate those 1,000 vulnerabilities within a month or 2, right? Those vulnerabilities, depending on their impact to your organization, right, and their level, you have to do a prioritization. PCI says, or other regulation says, you ensure your critical or high-risk issues are remediated in time. If Equifax had deployed that patch from release, like they had 2 months, but they didn't deploy it, right? If they had deployed it, that breach could have been avoided. So as long as you identify the key or critical risks or critical vulnerabilities, you can just focus on them, that is first. You may come across technical challenges where you can't do that. There's a vendor dependency, an obsolete system where you can, or your application will crash and all, right? There is a way you can always implement mitigating control. Engage with your assessor, give them complete visibility on what's happening, not during audit, but on ongoing basis, right? whenever you perform such reviews and all, if you see you are not able to deploy this patch or update and all, and because there are limitations and all, engage with your assessor. Give them a visibility, and you can work on having some mitigating or compensating control which addresses the risk. The key point is, irrespective whether you can deploy the patch or update, you have to ensure you address the risk associated with that vulnerability. And that's where you can take help from your security officers or engage with an assessor. Then use a scanning tool. If you are performing frequent scan and all, use scanning tools to identify such issues on timely manner, or have industry outside sources to get the information on as and when there are security patches and updates are released and all. Because in many cases we have seen companies are not aware that certain patch or certain update has been released in a month. I mean, sometimes you just come to know that when a quarterly scan happens and it shows up that you have some critical vulnerability, that patch was released 3 or 4 months back, right? That's not the right way. You may be lucky that nothing has happened, but you never know. If someone is keeping eye, they might just use that as an entry, right, to compromise the system and all. Use good SIEM solutions, which not only collect the logs, but can also help you to alert it, right? As I said, you may have a good logging solution. You may be collecting all the event logs and all, but if there is no effective review performed for that collected log, you're bound to fail, right? And when breach happens, then you say, oh, we knew about it because our log was there, but no one acted upon it because no one was alerted. So ensure that you use good SIEM solutions, which not only can collect the log or monitor events, but can also alert it, right? So good review mechanism should be there to avoid such things. Moving next, management buy-in. As I said, all issues which we have talked about so far, if you don't have a management buy-in, right, there is no commitment from the stakeholders and all, they'll fail, they're bound to fail. It's always, the C-level folks, your middle management has to involve in the compliance program for it being effective. So management commitment towards compliance has to be there, top management oversight, and demonstrating ROI for compliance. As Kishore said again, that there are data security rating reports available. Control Case is working on that. Now, when you go to top management, tell them that we have some issues and all. They are not interested to hear that what technical vulnerability you have. They want to know, what is my security posture? Tell me where I stand. Such data security rating reports, be it AAA to -C and all, will help your management to know where you stand and all, to get your budget's approval. If your rating is -C or B, how from B to go to A, from A to AA and AAA and all, it will help you. It will give them a visibility on where you stand, what issues are there, and what budget requirements you have and all, right? So it's basically will help you to show the return on investment with those. Obviously, as Alok said in the morning, that nobody wants to be in the press or media for bad reasons, right? Now that is indirect ROI, right? There is no tangible that you implement security control and this is what you're going to gain. It can become a market differentiator. There are many organizations out there who want to only get engaged with compliant service provider. We have so many organizations where it is more of a business requirement. That is an ROI, right? That you gain so much business by showing that you are compliant, right? So it just helps. Compliance can act as a market differentiator, as I said. Ensure that you have periodic management meetings so that management is given a dashboard. This compliance or security ratings report that gives that dashboard to the management, it will help to get that management buy-in, right? So it's very essential to ensure that management's there. That's pretty much I have as common compliances which we have seen so far. Just want to know if you have any further questions on any of things.
Have you started working on a unified control framework and associated metrics that we can gather all through our technology? So we have a state of continuous compliance, because we're always collecting, and then this moves on to you where you need to do compliance as a service and privacy as a service, because 75% of the businesses here in the United States are small businesses, and they have the lion's share of employees as well. So they have very limited people. So you become the compliance officer for the business. You can assist on those quarterly management meetings. Are you working towards that?
Kishore, you want to answer that?
That's a good, the question was, are we working towards the two key areas? One is continuous compliance, right? And kind of filtering it down to the individual level of privacy, as Jen talked about earlier, which was the small businesses actually rely on that. The answer is we firmly believe that eventually the solution has to involve technology, right? And a mantra in our company is use technology to audit technology, right? And so there's absolutely no doubt that we will not be accurate unless we are firmly using technology to audit technology. Now, whether that happens quarterly, daily, weekly, monthly, is a frequency which we're trying to kind of so we are working on it. What we are still trying to figure out is how quickly, it's not about, I think it's lesser right now as we see it, about how quickly can we tell where there's a problem, to how can we operationalize and enable our partners to identify the problem, seep it through their organization, and act on that problem to get rid of that problem, right? And whether it's a vulnerability, whether it's a vulnerability or a mismatched user identity, it's, I think we're getting better internally as a company to, I think we're pretty good as a company to identify the problem. I think where we want to be is how do we enable our customers and our ecosystem to be able to quickly solve that problem, right? And that comes back to earlier some of the things we said, which is doing it continuously, but also doing better, through mobile apps and better alerting. Me as, Kishore, what do I need to worry about today, number one, right? I have a million things I can worry about, but give me a priority of 1, 2, 3 and solve it at a time. So it's about, to your point, it's about identifying it, and we are working on identifying it, but we are also cognizant of the fact that we are trying to find out that once we identify it, how do we enable the ecosystem to actually act on it? With the metrics, that's right. Yeah, and obviously the question was, it was a twofold question, right? For the first part of the question was on continuous compliance. Are we, as Control Case, working towards it? And then the second part was, as Jen talked about, from a privacy perspective, as it gets down to the individual level and the ecosystem as a whole, how do we start tackling that holistic issue? And it really comes down to an ecosystem, and I think the system will be successful when it's a successful ecosystem. Identifying it is one part of it, which we can do. Enabling companies like all of you guys to be able to act on it in a timely manner before a rogue agent can act on it is actually a very important part of it too. And we talked about, and as Jen talked about privacy, I really firmly believe that privacy has so many implications because we live in a digital world, and 5, 6, 7 years from now, if you know someone's private data, you can be that person in so many different ways that it just becomes fundamental to to our individual security. We're not quite there, but I think I think Pramod talked about the Equifax breach, and there've been healthcare. You match the Equifax breach with the healthcare records that have been stolen. You match it with like 4 or 5 different data points. If someone has every piece of information that I have, then how can they not, in a digital world, they can be me. They can access my bank account. They can access my driver's license. They could be sitting here, right? In a future world and doing this. So it all kind of eventually ties in, but we have to figure it out as an ecosystem, which we are working on, but we all will have to work on it together.
Right, so the key is going to be establishing the list of metrics that we can deploy to
That's
gather the information, to assure our assessors that we have these security controls in place.
That's right.
Right.
Being able to measure it.
That's the thing that I'm asking about, is we need a unified control framework, then we can assure all of our customers we have met, right? Test once, report many, right? So do we have metrics?
Yeah, so so on the unified framework, we have, so the question was, are we working on a unified framework? And so we have kind of narrowed, we have boiled down about, the 15 international regulations into 240 data points, individual data points that then map to these 15 regulations. So that is our framework. It's the control case, we call it the control case integrated standard. It maps to all the 15 standards. So think of the control case integrated standard as being kind of the middle of the line. On the left-hand side is the audit. On the right-hand side of that is, for each of those data points, automation to measure it, right? So Nirvana is, so we have built 240 data points. That's the program. That's how the world is. We are fairly confident if a new IT regulation comes out, we might have to add a question or two here and there, but generally, in those 240 questions, we have it covered between privacy, availability, and security. And that's the right-hand side of it, which is, I'd say, a third. We are about a third.
It's already.
So we are about a third of it is automated, where we can collect it, but we are really focusing on the more harder ones before we get to the easier ones, right? So vulnerabilities, logs, these are some of the more harder ones. And so, I think if you look at the general environment, we are at a third. When you look at something like cloud or Amazon or some of the cloud automation where there's more standardization, we are probably more around 2/3. So somewhere in that space. So we have the metrics identified, we audit against it, and then we're trying to automate it. And we are somewhere between 1/3 and 2/3 in there. Obviously not 100% there, but somewhere in that space.
Thank you. So thank you, Pramod, for your presentation. Learned a lot.